All right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Velero team's community meeting. This is August 20, and we have Steve, Chris, Adnan. I cannot pronounce her last name. Adnan, I'm sorry. Abdul Hussein. Now I can.
Great, yeah.
Nolan Burbaker, myself, Carlita Campos, and that's all we have for Velero team, and also some of our community members. On the agenda today, we are going to talk about, as always, what we have been working on. I think Steve can start with talking about the V1.1 beta bug fixes and other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, over the past week or two since we put out the first beta for 1.1, we've been just working through testing and doing some bug fixes. So definitely wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who's been testing the betas. It's been really helpful for finding bugs and surfacing some scenarios that the core team didn't cover themselves. So I think we're in pretty good shape at this point. We put the second beta out last week. And haven't really had any new issue reports since then. So I think we're in good shape for releasing the GA version of 1.1. So thanks again to the testers. And then I have the next bullet, so I'll just jump to that. I've been working on this issue number 192, which I've talked about in previous community meetings and sort of shared the design for, but there's an issue around not being able to essentially create a copy of a persistent volume if you're doing a restore that involves remapping a namespace. And so this could occur if you have a namespace in one cluster and you're trying to create a second copy of that namespace, either for testing purposes or for whatever other reason. But if that original namespace is using a persistent volume, then when you try to create a copy of the namespace, Velero previously could not actually create a copy of the persistent volume as well. So I've started doing the development work on that. I have some working code, so I just wanted to do kind of a quick demo of that. It hasn't been merged yet, so this is development bits only. But let me switch to my terminal and I can show that off real quick. All right, is size okay on the terminal window?
Good for me.
All right, thanks. Okay, so let's see. So I have my Velero dev build installed here. Let me just resize this window a little bit. All right. So first thing I'll show you, I have the Nginx example app installed here. And if we take a look, I have a persistent volume that's being used by that namespace for the Nginx log. So this is just our standard example. And I guess the other thing I'll show you is that inside that volume, going to exec into it and go to the Nginx log directory. So if we look at what's in here, we have a handful of different files, but I've added this file called prod-ns, which just says foo. So that's what's in the persistent volume right now. So first thing I'm going to do is just create a backup. And I'm just going to include the Nginx example namespace. And so everything's configured for snapshots right now. I think this cluster is running on GKE, so we'll just be getting GKE snapshots. So now it's done, and if I just do a describe with the details, we'll see that we got one persistent volume snapshot. So far so good. So now what I want to do is I actually want to restore from that backup, but I want to restore into a different namespace. So I'll say Velero restore create from backup demo, and then I'll use the namespace mappings flag And I'll map from Nginx example into, Nginx demo. So I'll just go ahead and run this. Actually, before I run it, on this bottom window here, I'm just going to put a watch on PVCs in that namespace so you can sort of see what's happening in real time. All right, so I'll start the restore now and also do a watch on PVs. Okay, so everything happened pretty quickly here. But what you can see, hopefully, let me actually just resize this window a little bit. Sorry about that. So if you look at the watch for the PV, basically our old PV that was claimed by the Nginx example namespace stuck around, and then we got a new PV with a different name that was created, became available, and then was claimed by the Nginx demo namespace by the Nginx logs persistent volume claim. And if you look on the bottom, you have kind of the PVC side of the story. So you had a new PVC called Nginx logs that was created within that Nginx demo namespace, and then it was bound to this new PV. So you can see the volume name starts with PVC-FB, and if you look up here, that's the same new one that was created. So far so good. And if we just look at the status of our PVs now, they're both bound by claims in two different namespaces. Hopefully by now, the pod is actually running in that new namespace, so it is. And so I can just exec into it. And if I go into that Nginx log directory, we'll see, okay, we've got that same file that was created in the production namespace. And if I just take a look at what's in there, it has foo, which was what came from the production namespace. So that basically covers the feature. So previously, you wouldn't be able to get a second copy of this persistent volume created from the snapshot, but with these code changes, you can now create a full clone of the namespace, including the persistent volumes. So I know that's a feature that many of you out there have been anxiously waiting for, so I'm pretty excited to bring this to a conclusion. So any questions on that?
So will this support CSI volumes?
That is a good question. I mean, the code right now is, we obviously don't have the CSI code into the Velero core. So I think we'll just, when we get to adding CSI support, we're going to have to think about how to make sure that we support this. The code in the restore package for persistent volumes has a bunch of different branches based on whether you're doing a regular snapshot restore or a RESTIC restore or neither. And so basically when we add the CSI support, we'll need to make sure that it falls into the appropriate case there.
And I guess that was more a leading question to get at. This won't support CSI volume cloning. So there's a CSI API for that's in development, but this does not support it. This is using Velero's own snapshots.
Yeah, so that'll definitely be an interesting thing to think about down the road. And as some of these features that we've had in Velero for a while, or that work for traditional Velero snapshots, get exposed through CSI, how do we kind of maintain feature parity there? So it's it is entirely possible that when we down the road, when we look at adding support for something like this for CSI snapshot specifically, that we would actually use the upstream clone feature rather than kind of having our own implementation of it.
That is really cool, Steve. Thank you. Does
Sure.
anybody else want to ask a question about that feature?
Yeah, sorry, quick question. The clone PV, that has a name that we generate for it, right? The new PV that we create.
It does, yeah.
And we just use the same format to generate that? Because it looks like...
Yeah, so you can see now that the format is similar. I mean, the formats are basically just PVC followed by a UID. This is actually an area that I still need to figure some things out with. So typically with a dynamically provisioned PV, the name of the PV is PVC followed by the UID of the PVC that it's provisioned for. But we can't really do that for PVs that we are restoring from Snapshot, because we actually explicitly create the PV first. And so we don't yet know what the PVC's UID will be. So for now, I just have it putting a random UID in there. But if you look at the UID of the PVC that ends up claiming it, it doesn't actually match. So I'm thinking we may want to actually not use this format, add something that indicates like Velero created this PV, and still give it, you know, some random component of the name, but not make it appear like it's a dynamically provisioned PV.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because if you were relying on that for whatever reason, yeah, that might be confusing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Should we open the tickets?
I mean, I'm still working on the issue. So
yeah, I think because I remember that being described in the design doc. I think we said it was going to have a new name, but we didn't really discuss how that name would be generated. But yeah, since there isn't PR for this, I think we can just wait for that.
Yeah, I didn't even realize until I started to work through this that the names of PVs do have the UID of the PVC within them. I actually thought it was just a random UID. So that was something I learned yesterday.
Yeah, I would have assumed that too, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone should be relying on trying to map that back to the PV, at least that way, especially since it probably has a reference anyway, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's like the claim ref that links the two, so that's probably the actual reliable way to map the things. But still, if we can avoid confusion by using a slightly different format, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. Any more
All right.
or comments? We can bring back the agenda, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah.
Nolan, you are next.
Yeah, so something that we found with the 1.1 beta 1, actually Scott and Dylan over at Red Hat found this, was when you're doing a Restic restore with the 1.1 beta 1, the Restic CRDs that we use were not actually being properly mapped to the right namespace. And this was a bug that basically stemmed from a disconnect in how Velero's server and Velero's client got a custom namespace. So we've unified that code and made that more consistent in Velero 1.1 beta 2. So if you are writing plugins that need the namespace, you should get them now. This really wasn't surfaced until we started putting clients in some of the built-in entry plugins. So thank you, Scott and Dylan, for that.
And Nolan, we're now using the downward API, right, to set an environment variable with the namespace?
Yeah, so the server code before did an inspection of a service account that Kubernetes mounted in. It basically parsed a file to look for the namespace, which was nice in that it didn't require the user to do any work, but that's only available if you're running on Kubernetes or within a cluster. If you're running it from your laptop, that's not necessarily accurate. And we're using the downward API to expose a Velero namespace environment variable for our Restic portions. So this basically unified that, and the server will now use that variable to look up the custom namespace. So if you use Velero install, then you shouldn't need to do anything. It'll just use the downward API to inspect the YAML manifest I think we need to get this into the Helm chart still.
Okay, and for folks who already have an existing Velero install of like 1.0, if they're using an alternate namespace, they'll need to add this to their deployment manifest, right?
Right. Yep. And as part, I think I have the PR open here, and as part of that, we included an upgrade doc that has a kube control patch command that will do that for you. Yeah, so that's really the only upgrade step that we have for 1.1. Everything else should be in place, but if you're using a custom namespace and you have an existing install that you want to upgrade, you will have to run this patch command, which will go add that downward API environment variable for you.
Cool, sounds good.
Any other questions?
Is there any comments or questions for Nolan? Okay, so I'll move on. I'm next. Last week, I think it's worth mentioning, I was out on Monday because I was doing a mentoring of a VMware Code House event. It's an event that where VMware takes a group of 20 women and it's basically a hackathon, and they get some of us to mentor them through it. And this year, the team was doing an app that would foster diversity and inclusion and deploy that app on Kubernetes. And it was amazing, great experience. And besides that, the most significant thing I worked on was writing an article about Velero. That is, we don't know where we're going to publish it yet, but maybe on something like NewStack. And I'm co-authoring it with Tom, our project manager. And basically this article highlights the need for Kubernetes clusters to still have backup. In that department, things don't change. Most applications are for apps in production, and you still need to back things up, basically. And it goes into how Velero allows that, and also lets you migrate data if you need to move from one provider to another. And with any question about that, pretty straightforward stuff. So what is coming up is what we're going to talk next, and I will hand off to Steve.
Sure, I can cover these pretty quickly. So first of all, we're planning on releasing 1.1 very soon. So the current plan is Thursday. And certainly a potential that would move by a day or two, but unless anything changes, we should be releasing that on Thursday. So keep a heads up for the announcement there. And then beyond that, we're in the progress of defining exactly what we're going to tackle for 1.2. We've been talking about a lot of these things already, so there's probably not much that's new here, but I have included in the agenda a link to the ZenHub board. I'll actually probably update this link so it points to the app.zenhub.com page, but you can go in and see what's in the release backlog tagged for 1.2. That'll give you an indication of what's in there if you're interested. Just kind of at a high level, the things that we're planning on covering are continuing to do some stabilization and some improvements to the RESTIC integration with the hope of bringing that to GA. We're not sure if we're going to complete that work in 1.2 or if some will continue on into 1.3, but we definitely hope to make some good progress there. We're planning to start work on the official CSI snapshot integration. So as you probably know, Nolan in particular worked a lot on prototyping some integration with CSI snapshots during the 1.0 release cycle, and those were implemented as out-of-tree plugins. But we do have a design that's just about ready to be approved for kind of the official integration, and so we will start work on that. This is another one that we don't necessarily expect to complete in 1.2, so some of it will push out to 1.3, but we'll definitely get started there. We're also looking at taking the existing cloud provider plugins for AWS, GKE, and Azure, and actually moving them out of Tree so that they kind of live on equal footing with any external plugins, and making some improvements to things like Velero install to make it easier to install Velero with plugins from the start. But this is mostly kind of a behind the scenes refactoring that shouldn't have a lot of user impact. We also want to start doing some research on encryption at rest. So we have a number of issues in the backlog related to this. We're not even sure, what a possible design for this might look like or kind of what's possible. And so we're planning to just do some investigation here and try and get a better sense of what our options are. And then we're also looking at adding some basic feature flag support to Velero. And this is particularly in the context of the CSI snapshot integration work. We want to make sure that we can start to merge some of the code into the master branch of Velero without necessarily having that feature or that functionality be activated for users if they don't want it. And so feature flags will be simple command line flags that get added to the Velero binary that allow you to optionally turn on certain features like the CSI snapshot work. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of what we have in scope for 1.2. Certainly if folks are interested in contributing, there are either issues within those bullet points or additional issues that are in the backlog that we'd love to have help working on. So come talk to us if you're interested in that. And then I guess the last thing to cover here is we've decided to move to monthly community meetings. So we've been doing 2 a month for the last few months. And I think we feel that we can kind of cover all of the content that we want to, and still have a fairly regular cadence by having 1 meeting a month. So our current plan is to do this on the first Tuesday of every month. And so the next meeting would not be until, I guess, the beginning of September. And from there, we'd move to 1 per month going forward. The schedule is, we're still making sure that we have the best schedule possible for everyone. So whether it's the first Tuesday, second Tuesday, third Tuesday, that may still change, but as of now, we're thinking about the first one. So we'll send out an updated invite pretty shortly to the mailing list.
Thank you, Steve. And before I ask people if they have any question about, before I loop around and bring Adnan for him to do a demo, I want to ask if anyone has any questions or comments about what Steve just covered. There's a bunch of stuff that he covered super quickly. So Adnan is ready to give us a demo of a feature he's been working on. Adnan, take it away.
Sure. Let me just share my screen. Oh, Steve, I think you need to. Yeah, thanks. So hopefully this is big enough for you to see. But yeah, so I've been working on this new from schedule flag in Velero Backup Create. So if you have a schedule, here's an example of one, and you want to run that manually at any point, you can now use Velero Backup Create from schedule and give it the name of the schedule, and it will go and create the exact same backup, labels and everything, and spec is matches as well, to run that backup manually at any point. And that's it.
I can see that being very useful. Thank you. Any questions?
Does that affect the timing of the schedule? So does running that backup mean that the schedule's cadence has changed?
No, so the schedule will, we won't change the last backup time in the actual schedule, which is what the schedule uses to find the next time to run. So yeah, it's kind of independent of that.
Does anybody have any question? I think we are ready to wrap it up. As always, we wanted to let you know you can join us on Kubernetes Slack. The channel is Velero. And I want to remind everyone that our survey is still running. It will be closing soon. So if you haven't had a chance to let us know how you use Velero, or even if you don't use Velero, but what the profile of your workloads are, what the profile of your workloads is, you can hop in there and let us know. So we'll find out how to best develop the tool for everyone. And contributor shout outs, we want to give a shout out to this user beta with 2 T's, for including object storage prefix in backup storage location map of config data. Nicholas Kowinski for a documentation fix for Helm install commands. User Colt-Chris for a docs fix for port forwarding commands. And finally, Dylan Murray and Scott Siago for testing beta 1 and finding bugs. Thank you so much for those. And with this, we'll wrap it up, stop recording, and we'll see you the first Tuesday of next month. Goodbye.
Thanks
everybody.
Thank you.